The same messianic passage from the prophet Micah that pinpointed the birthplace of Yahshua also foretold the eventual downfall of Assyria at the hand of Yahweh and the shepherd princes he raises up for the task. Thus, when Assyria falls during the last days, the Jews will know exactly who it was who has saved them.
When the Assyrian comes into our land, and when he treads in our palaces, then we will raise up against him 7 shepherds, and 8 princely men. They shall waste with the sword the land of Assyria, and the land of Nimrod at its entrances. Thus he shall deliver us from the Assyrian, when he comes into our land, and when he treads within our borders. Micah 5:5 and 6.
Isn't Assyria Iraq, and not Syria? Yes and no. Syria, as you know, is not the same as Assyria, although they were geographical neighbors. Modern Syria was originally known as Aram, whereas Assyria derives its name from Ashur. These were 2 of the 5 sons of Shem and grandsons of Noah. Today's borders have little to do with the territories of the ancient kingdoms. Though Assyria's capital, Nineveh, is now 100 miles or so within the borders of the immense present-day mass of Iraq, the original Assyria spread mainly to the west, encompassing much of present-day Syria. And remember, this was all part of the Persian Empire in Ezekiel's day, so it appears likely that Syria will indeed find itself on the losing end of this war, just like the other Islamic allies of Magog. At the very least, as we shall see, Damascus is toast. And what about Egypt? Today, Egypt is a mere shell of its former self, rife with poverty and conflict despite the billions of dollars America has pumped into its economy. It is known as the center of Islamic scholarship, an oxymoron if ever there was one, in the entire Middle East. Well did Isaiah prophesy concerning Egypt.
Surely the princes of Zoan are fools. Pharaoh's wise counselors give foolish counsel. How do you say to Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Where are they? Where are your wise men? Let them tell you now, and let them know what Yahweh of hosts has purposed against Egypt. The princes of Zoan have become fools. The princes of Noph are deceived. They have also deluded Egypt, those who are the mainstay of its tribes. Yahweh has mingled a perverse spirit in her midst, and they have caused Egypt to err in all her work, as a drunken man staggers in his vomit. Isaiah 19:11 through 14.
Here, as in so many cases in Scripture, we see Yahweh hardening the heart of the Egyptians. It bears repeating that Yahweh's blinding of the eyes of sinners to the truth, or as it's put here, mingling a perverse spirit in her midst, is always in response to a previous rejection of His Word. God will never force anyone to change his mind, but He will occasionally petrify a previously held attitude, effectively closing the enemy's mind on the subject. Daniel's prophecy of a war in the last days meshes quite nicely with Ezekiel's description of the invasion of Magog. However, it's told not from Gog's point of view this time, but from that of the Antichrist, described here as the king who shall do according to his own will. Without getting too involved in the details of the action, which I'll cover later, notice that Egypt plays the part of the aggressor.
At the time of the end, the king of the south, Egypt, shall attack him, this would be the Antichrist, and the king of the north, probably Syria, shall come against him. Many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his, the Antichrist's, hand: Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all of the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. Daniel 11:40, 41 through 43.
As always, directions are given in relation to the Holy Land. Egypt is invariably described in Scripture as the kingdom of the south. The context reveals that the Antichrist is occupying Israel at the time, probably in the form of a United Nations peacekeeping force with a large European contingent. See Daniel 11:45. Egypt makes the first move, invading Israel in a pincher action with the king of the north. But the Antichrist strikes back, putting Egypt, Cush, and Phut under his thumb. In other words, he ends up controlling all of northern and eastern Africa, which, by the way, makes his kingdom look a lot like that of Rome under Nero. Whether even more nations than these are included under the heading many countries is a matter of speculation, but I think it's a safe assumption. The first place to look for candidates for his conquest are the nations under the banner of the Magog Federation listed above, Muslim countries one and all. Interestingly, Jordan, called Edom, Moab, and Ammon in the Daniel passage, escapes his grasp, though we shall learn that their fate is sealed anyway. And there is no specific indication that Saudi Arabia or Yemen are taken, nor do we know precisely what happens to the Muslims living in Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and so forth. A few 100 million Muslims live in India, and Indonesia and the Philippines are infected with the same plague. Of these and others we have no biblical insights other than that they're lost like all the other Muslims in the world. The Islamic nations have but one thing in common, an irrational hatred for Yahweh's chosen people, Israel. It will be their downfall, their Achilles' heel. The psalmist Asaph had Islam pegged when he wrote these words.
Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Yisrael may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you. Psalm 83, 1-5.
Note that the passage flatly declares that an enemy of Israel is an enemy of Yahweh. Jeremiah's prophecy of the Babylonian invasion will look as fresh as tomorrow's newspaper when the invasion begins.
Out of the north calamity shall break forth on all of the inhabitants of the land. For behold, I am calling all the families of the kingdoms of the north, says Yahweh. They shall come, and each one set his throne at the entrance of the gates of Jerusalem, against all its walls all around, and against all the cities of Judah. I will utter my judgments against them concerning all their wickedness, because they have forsaken me, burned incense to other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands. Jeremiah 1:14-16.
It's interesting that Yahweh will not judge them for their idolatry until they attack Israel. Note also that these verses specify the direction from which Gog's invasion will come, from the north. Yahweh takes his oath to Israel seriously. The nation who helps itself to her land is in for a humiliating shock, for God will not allow it to be taken away from his people permanently.
Thus says Yahweh, because the enemy has said of you, this would be the mountains of Israel, Aha, the ancient heights have become our possession, because they made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, so that you became the possession of the rest of the nations, and you are taken up by the lips of talkers and slandered by the people. Surely I have spoken in my burning jealousy against the rest of the nations and against all Edom, who gave my land to themselves as a possession, with whole-hearted joy and spiteful minds, in order to plunder its open country. Because you have borne the shame of nations, I raised my hand in an oath that surely the nations that are around you shall bear their own shame. Ezekiel 36, 2 and 3, 5 through 7.
Since the 7th century, the sword of Islam has plundered and shamed the land of Israel as the Jews endured their exile among the nations. Edom, part of modern Jordan, is singled out as the lead perpetrator, perhaps indicating that they will once again try to help themselves to the West Bank. Or maybe the United Nations, the talkers and slanderers of whom Ezekiel spoke, will assume control over the whole disputed territory, making it the possession of the rest of the nations. Sorry, Yahweh has other ideas. And what of those peace-loving Muslims the media keeps referring to? First, understand that those Muslims who preferred to live peacefully and avoid bloodshed were the first to earn the scathing condemnation of Allah and His Prophet. They were called hypocrites, assigned as prime targets in this life by Muhammad's jihad fighters, and then consigned to the hottest fires of Allah's hell. But the Bible has something to say about them as well.
Woe is me that I dwell in Meshech, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar. My soul has dwelt too long with one who hates peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Psalm 120, 5 through 7.
Will Islam have a role to play in the last days? Most certainly. They will be the very puff of wind that brings this house of cards we call human civilization crashing to the ground.